Hey guys, today I am looking at PSO2. So this is a sequel to, of course, the first Phantasy Star Online. It's funny that I just played this game recently, and the first one, I didn't realize, oh right, the second game was out and it's an MMO online thing, and it's something that definitely came out, but you didn't really hear a lot about it. And so finally picking it up, I can see why that is. It's definitely a good game, but it's not amazing. Even in my PSO review, the first one, even though it was on GameCube and the Dreamcast and an early version of what an MMO was like, I mean, the biggest issue with it I had was really the movement and all that stuff. But the original PSO was very, very repetitive, as most MMOs are supposed to function. But I just found it way too repetitive, way too not fun. It's fun to play for an hour or two and do a few missions, but it's not really supposed to be played for a long, long time. And the aesthetic is very strong. And I will admit, here in PSO2, the aesthetic is still strong. I really, really put a big smile on my face when I heard the same sound effects from the first game kind of recycled and put in here. The loading screen sound and other things really made me smile. And all of the new sound effects they've added also are really, just really good. So fresh, so clean, so video gamey. They sound really, really good. And the music's also pretty good too. While you don't have the small niche feeling of, oh, this is just a weird MMO game, this game kind of tends to not live up to the rest of the standards of the other MMOs in its class. In that it's okay, it's fine, but again, it's just very, very repetitive. It doesn't have that niche cachet feel of being a weird GameCube game that's supposed to be for an MMO, and now it's just a normal MMO. So that kind of cachet is kind of gone. Any kind of nostalgia is not here for it. And playing it, I will give it to, a benefit of the doubt, or a benefit that the movement and the style of gameplay feels more like an action game from 2010 than a very kind of watered down, basic, repetitive MMO experience. It's very, very fluid. And the one thing I think I do have to give credit for is that they nailed the movement. The movement in the first game was so atrociously slow. You could get stun locked. You move at such a slow rate that here it's the complete opposite, and it's really a great breath of fresh air. That being said, though, the original PSO was never really meant to be played a lot or really intensely, and so with this game trying to be an actual MMO, it just feels, I don't know, a little drawn out, or a little there's all this content here, but none of it is really good. And this is the issue that a lot of modern games have, a lot of MMOs, is that, okay, you have this big giant expansive world, but how do you make it matter? How do you make quests and storylines that the characters or the player actually cares about? And it's kind of a hard thing to do. I mean, everything about this game aesthetically is amazing. The music, the look of the design of the technology, the suits, the armor, it looks really, really good. It sounds really, really good. And the combat is also very smooth as well. And it's almost like this checks all the boxes, and it really meets my expectations, if not exceeds them in certain places. But at the same time, the content is just very, just the same thing over and over again. I really did not feel the grip to keep playing after I had finished the first few bosses. I kind of thought, okay, this is the gameplay, and it's going to be like this. It's going to be unchanging mostly for the rest of the experience. And for an MMO, for certain games like Final Fantasy, they kind of triage that. I mean, it's the biggest MMO right now, by having a really well done story. And so the story, that's the thing that stays dynamic. It's changing and develops. And here, yeah, they have all the systems from the shop, the menus, the levels, the skill trees, the currency, the whatever, all the item storage. And I can't believe they still have like a limit on item storage. I think that is a thing in other MMOs, but here, I don't know, that was the biggest issue with the first Phantasy Star, is you would get enough items till your inventory was full, and then you'd have to put down a teleporter to go back to Pioneer 2 and sell all your stuff, and then go back and pick up the stuff that you didn't have room for, and then you finally get to the end of the mission, and then you do that anyway. I just found it super super tedious. But in any case, again, so the story is pretty. I don't know. It's really not built off the previous game or anything. You basically crash land in a pod from some unknown spaceship, and you're called a meteon because you're like a meteor from afar. And there's someone else there who also came from the space, but they also don't remember what they are. You end up on this kind of tropical beach village. You meet the locals, and there are these evil things called dolls. And they don't tell you what it stands for, but these dolls attack these alien creatures, basically, that are inhuman, and so you have to fight them. They kill the chief leader, and you help his daughter kind of come back to the central city and just do a bunch of side quests from there. And so the game just kind of takes off from there, and just a bunch of side stuff happens. So, from that big development, you cut to, oh, we met this guy called Dozer, who's like a mech, and he's gone missing, and he needs help, and he trained us. And so all this other really non-related stuff happens, and I'm sure until the story comes back together and refocuses on the main story. But the main story is basically there are bad guys out there, and we need to defeat the bad guys. There's really not a lot going on with the story, and that's really disappointing because the setting of this game is absolutely wonderful. It's one of my favorite settings, I think, of any game, where it mixes the aesthetics of high technology and also that paradise tropic vibe where you're in the islands, you have the palm trees, and you have this weird so almost society that is highly advanced, highly refined, and removed from the rest of the world. And is something that actually Star Ocean did really well in its intro, Beyond the Tides of Time, I think it was called, where it's like a tropical beach resort, but also is imbued with all this technology and whatever. And it's just a really cool setting, and I appreciate it. The music, the characters, everything looks and sounds great. But I would prefer if this was a 20-hour experience, or maybe something more like Metal Gear Rising is what this really reminded me of. And have a nice, short, focused story that would make this game an instant classic. But because they kind of draw it out and they expect you to spend so much time with it without really furthering the gameplay or the story or anything, it kind of blows it all. It kind of gives everything it is in front of you and then expects you to stick with it. So, I mean, the movement, you can wall jump. That's something that would be in a lockable another game. Wall jumping, gliding, being able to switch classes to anything else, from a gunner, ranger, having certain combos, certain power-ups. They give you pretty much almost everything right up front, and it really feels a little bit cheap because if I were to design this game, I would constantly give the player after each mission, a new power, new upgrade, new whatever. But here they just kind of give you everything at the start, so you really don't have the incentive to keep going. And other than that, you would also incentivize the player with story bits and components. And again, they just don't really have that here. It's just not the story is really not a strong aspect of this experience. But everything else I really, really like. And I wish this was a better game or a better review, or maybe just a single player game that was focused. But alas, it is what it is. I guess on that point, all the classes are very, very cool. So you have your sword. You have your kind of hammer magic users that do all these kind of elemental attacks. You have the gunner classes that have rifles and things, and those feel really, really good to use. I think in an ideal world, again, it'd be really cool that you just had a sword and a gun, and you just swap between those two in combat, and that would be the main core gameplay loop. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. You have basic attack, heavy attack, special attack. You hold down the L trigger, suddenly you have 3 more special attacks for where those things were. So it has a shift button, basically. And playing this on Xbox, it definitely feels more like a console game, just the way the character moves around the environment. But you could definitely play this on PC with mouse and keyboard as well. But overall, I just felt that even though you had 6 major moves and really good movement and pretty decent enemy variety, The issue that I ran into is that I realized that once I figured out my best combos, what certain moves that drain certain functions and other things like that, I realized I'd be doing the exact same combos for quite a while until I unlocked one more move. And all the new moves you unlock were things like War Cry, which makes the enemy attracted to you in combat. So, non-passives that just end up being highly strategic for very specific situations. So I wasn't really developing my moveset a lot, and I really didn't feel like I was going to get a lot of new moves, or at least a significant move that would totally change the gameplay, which I don't really expect either. I mean, I keep comparing this to Metal Gear Rising, where, yeah, you get a new move and it doesn't change the basic gameplay. And I was talking to my friend about this, and I said the basic underlying premise that MMOs have as a problem is that because you have all these classes and all these characters and all these possible reactions the enemy could have, the only thing you end up doing to make the character feel empowered and have that feeling of progression is just increasing the number. Just increase the amount of damage you do and the amount of health the enemy has. While with other games, there's a lot more nuance to it, because you can stumble the enemy, you can stagger the enemy, you can knock them unconscious, you can do all these weird, cool things that makes essentially every single encounter with the enemy unpredictable. Even Metal Gear Solid 5, you have so many gadgets that no one single encounter is ever going to go the exact same way unless you're just purposely cheesing all of them. But overall, yeah, that's just kind of the main issue I ran into, is that the gameplay, I realized, basically peaked in the first hour of the game, and I had nothing else holding me there or nothing else super interesting to keep pulling me along. So I just said, yeah, I guess that's it. And I kind of had the similar experience with the original PSO. Great character designer, great universe, but actually playing these games, even as gorgeous as they look and as cool as they look and as cool as they sound, is kind of extremely tedious. It's really disappointing to say that, because I think it has such a great setting, such a great aesthetic. It has so much potential as a series that I would love to see it reinvigorated, revamped or something, because I really do love Phantasy Star, despite not actually liking playing these games. I like the games in theory and in general, but I don't actually like playing them. But everything else about them I absolutely adore. I really don't know if this would succeed as an MMO. I like the idea of it, but I think it would be far more successful as a standalone game, a standalone action game at least, with all the resources funneled into a specific 20-hour storyline or something with hard mode and all that other stuff. But yeah, I appreciate the fact they try to bring this back. Again, I've heard this is like semi-popular, not super popular, but it also did strike me that the baseline gameplay for this game, I mean, World of Warcraft came out 2004, Final Fantasy 14 around 2010, and dated mechanics, and then they saved it, but they had to like import and repair everything. So a lot of those original fluid animations that you see in 1.0 of 14 just are gone in the current version of it, because they had to scrap so much and just kind of make it bare bones and then rebuild it from the ground up. So I feel like eventually there is going to be an MMO that's going to come out, and the basic gameplay is going to be something like Metal Gear Rising or something like this, which it really did remind me of, which was super, super impressive, because when your basic gameplay feels like the average gameplay of another game that a studio spent a whole few years working on, it just feels really, really good to have that basic experience where it's like, oh, this is not just a giant expansive world, but it also has depth and meat and quality to it, rather than just being a sprite that keeps doing the exact same things over and over again and placating you with dopamine charges of level ups and items and rewards and whatever. Yeah, and ultimately the ultimate goal of at least the Final Fantasy 14, as I found, is just to be really good at your glams and your customization, playing dress up at the end of the day. So yeah, that's kind of my revelation on this point. But yeah, PSO2, really, I know, really cool game, really a game I really, really, really want to like and recommend. But at the end of the day, just gives a very average feeling. It just was like, okay, that was cool. I don't feel like playing this more. I don't know if they could do something with multiplayer to make it more of a multiplayer game, since those are super popular. Even things like Lethal Company, where you don't even have uh, overall progress, is just for fun and giggles. I think it would be really interesting to have. I don't know. I've always said this proximity voice chat. I'm sorry. I know it probably ruined the experience for most people, or not for most people, for a small minority of people. But I think that it would ultimately really create a really funny experience if they had that. Another thing that also kind of took me away from PSO2, just on this end note here of this review, is the creative mode where you can basically make your own house and base. I got really invested into that. I spent like a whole day making my little Greco-Roman futuristic house terrace with rows of trees down the center, like the Palace of Versailles or something, down to the waterfront. And I had this little dock where it had a little, light beacon on it. I just found that to be very fun, the creative mode, where you could just kind of do kind of Minecraft creative mode and just spawn in a bunch of floor tiles. Because again, the aesthetics of PSO are so well refined and designed that they're just really, really fun to mess around with that aesthetic of the world. And so I think even as a standalone creative mode, I think it'd be very, very addictive, or at least as a demo to get people attracted to this series. It'd be very smart to market those things kind of up front. Yeah, no, I just feel like there's so much potential for an amazing game here, and it's being redistributed and focused on content that's essentially MMO, very, very thin slop content. It's like taking a chunk of butter and just scraping it across an entire mile. And that's, the quality of the content you have. Instead of just blasting the player with constant upgrades and developments and story beats, it just drags its feet through everything, and it just makes it feel kind of like a dead world and a dead experience. And that's very unfortunate, but that's kind of what I felt at the end of the day. Anyway, so yeah, lots of potential. Didn't really hit my expectations. I'd love to see more of this universe, or more from this studio and Sega in general. And yeah, that's all I got to say about it. See you guys later. Bye.